trying to find where. All right, I have 9 o'clock. I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. I'm Mike Moore with the Friday Law Firm. My partner, Katie Campbell, is also on. And we're here this morning to talk to you a little bit about shared work programs. In the post-PPP world, as a lot of people are about to exhaust their payroll protection program funding and trying to determine how to get their businesses back on full-time track with everybody working or working as much as they can. The shared work program is an opportunity for businesses to ride out, hopefully, couple of months anyway, in figuring out a way to keep their workforce and to be productive. And once we come out of all this, to be able to fully staff. Katie and I have got a relatively short PowerPoint to go through with y'all, and would hope that you have some questions or comments. And I would encourage you to put any questions you have in the chat box for everyone if you want to, so we can kind of go through either as we go through or at the end of our presentation, go through those questions and comments, and maybe actually get a discussion going. I think we'll have a small enough group to be able to do a little bit of that. If you feel like your question, you don't want everybody to know you're asking the question, then send it in chat just to me, and I'll look at it at the end and ask it, and we'll remain anonymous that way. So the shared work program is an old idea. Shared work programs have been utilized by, before all this started, 28 different states across the country, including Arkansas. And I think Arkansas has had a shared work program as part of the unemployment system for approximately 30 years. What we've experienced in talking with the people at Department of Workforce Services is that until the last 90 days, nobody ever used a shared work program because it was a little cumbersome. So then along comes the CARES Act that the president signed on March 27th, and it is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. And one of the big parts of the CARES Act was its fundamental change in unemployment compensation laws for the remainder of 2020, extreme changes in unemployment compensation through the end of July, and the dropping onto the state's lap of tremendous changes in the processes that the states have to go through to get unemployment benefits out to the people. The wonderful thing about the CARES Act for the states is that the federal government is funding the vast majority of the increased unemployment benefits that are required by the CARES Act, and the CARES Act actually provides for grant funding to states to cover the increased cost of administering these changes. All right, so what is a shared work program? It is a program specifically administered by the Department of Workforce Services. It allows employers to reduce their employees' hours by up to 40%. The program requires those hours to be reduced by at least 10%. So anywhere between 10 and 40%. It allows those employees to receive a portion of their unemployment benefits while working reduced hours. And I'll get to a little bit more of the math of that in a minute. And it provides that employees can receive up to 25 weeks of shared work benefits. So what happens is you have an employee and you reduce their work hours, and if they're a part of your shared work program, then they get to receive their reduced unemployment benefits. For example, if I am an employee and I make $50,000 a year, then my maximum unemployment benefit would be $451 per week in Arkansas. And so if I have my schedule reduced and my earnings reduced by 20%, then under the shared work program, I would still get $90 a week in unemployment benefits, as that's 20% of my maximum weekly benefit amount. That is in addition to the 80% of my normal pay that I would get. Under regular unemployment benefits without a shared work program, workers can earn only up to 140% of their weekly benefit amount. And after that, there's a dollar for dollar reduction in the amount of benefits they can receive. The upshot of that is if somebody has their hours reduced without a shared work program and they still make $631 a week, they can't get any unemployment. That they get zeroed out. And the shared work program does away with that requirement of the regular partial unemployment formula. So this is proven particularly beneficial for employers who got on the shared work program bus, so to speak, early, and were able to keep a lot of employees on, but reduce their hours across the board. And the public policy behind a shared work program is that what you do is you're reducing everybody by a little bit rather than putting people off work completely and on unemployment, because they know that in the big scheme of things, people who are unemployed have a higher tendency to remain unemployed, and the shared work program gets people back to more fully employed faster. It is under the CARES Act, the shared work program is beneficial for employers for several reasons. First, your experience ratings are not affected because all of the benefits paid under a shared work program are federally funded. You can keep your employees on the payroll. That way, when you need to get back up to full complement of employees, you have everybody there ready to go. It's good for employees because they actually receive their partial wages and they receive partial unemployment benefits rather than being zeroed out. And most importantly, they get $600 a week extra at least for the next 2 months. That is a huge benefit to those employees, and most of whom will make more on a shared work program than they would have made working. All right, so there's the one big requirement is that you cannot have laid off more than 10% of the employees in the program within the last 4 months. The secret there is the employees in the program is simply the names of the employees that an employer lists on their application. And Katie will get into that in a few minutes. The employee's normal weekly hours must be reduced by 10 to 40%, and the employee must be otherwise eligible, able to go to work. It does not require them to be out looking for other work, just that they are able and available to work the reduced hours. And the employer in the application must certify that had they not been able to take advantage of the shared work program, they would have laid off at least 10% of the employees in the affected group. And that would, I think the way that goes generally, and Katie will address it more specifically, is if you end up reducing your quote unquote affected group by 25%, then what you would say is that had you not been able to do that, you would have laid off 25% of the workers within that group. You are sharing the wealth, so to speak. You are spreading out the negative part of the reduced work. With that, I'll turn it over to Katie.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'll pick up where Mike left off and kind of talk about the mechanics of the shared work program in terms of how you apply. So the employer, it's really a three-step process. So first, the employer submits an application to DWS. It's a fairly straightforward application that consists of 4 pages, and you list the employees' names and social security.
Pay the employees a certain amount, and let the Department of Work Unemployment pay a certain amount.
Tabitha, I'm getting some feedback. I don't know if we can mute everybody else there. But on the application itself, as Mike alluded to, you do not have to list all employees. You can choose a select group of employees who would participate in the program, and that would be your affected group. So it does give you some flexibility in terms of who you select for the program. As long as you have 2 or more employees on the program, that's really the only requirement there. DWS then has to approve the application, and it's currently taking them about 3 weeks to approve these applications. I think in the past it had been, just three or 4 business days, but they are really buried over there right now with these applications because so many people are taking advantage of the program, and they're working as quickly as they can, and they've been very responsive. But as Mike said earlier, this was a program that was not used at all or very little just 90 days ago. And so this is all having to be typed into the computer system. It's not automated. And so it is taking some time. We've learned that they have moved some staff over there, so I'm hopeful that things will speed up over the next couple of weeks, but do know there will be a 2 or 3 week delay there in getting the application approved. The good news is that once approved, the benefits are backdated and they're retroactive. So if you submitted an application this week to be effective, starting this Sunday, and even if it wasn't approved for a couple of weeks, your employees would get benefits retroactive to this Sunday, which is good news. The next step in the process is employees must submit individual applications for unemployment benefits. This is just the regular application that they would submit if they were fully unemployed, and they can now submit these online through DWS's online system, which is a big benefit that they did not previously have for shared work. So now you can do this online, which is easier for employees and has streamlined things to get the program up and running more quickly. Finally, employees have to submit weekly paperwork, weekly certifications, basically to certify the hours that they worked, any absences or paid leave that they received, and then that must be signed and dated by the employee and the employer. We have seen that this is probably the biggest administrative burden for this program is you're having to, find each and every employee and have them physically sign and verify paperwork each week. But I think that all of our clients that have worked with this, they've come up with a pretty good system to make this work, and they would say it's worth the benefit of having the unemployment benefits for their employees. But do know that there would be a weekly form that you do have to complete. I will also add that, when we started this, the weekly form was 2 pages and it was extremely onerous. And since that time, DWS has realized that for both the employer and DWS themselves, that it would be helpful to get a more streamlined process in place. So the weekly certification has been extremely simplified. So now it really is just hours worked, any paid leave, any other work that the employee might have with another employer, and then a signature. So things have gotten a lot easier on that front, which is good news. I want to talk a little bit about subgroups, because this is something that I think we've all learned as we've gotten into doing these shared work programs. So as I said, the affected group on a shared work program just has to include 2 or more employees. And it doesn't have to include all employees in the company. But you can also break up your affected group or your program into subgroups. So it can have 1 or more subgroups, and these subgroups can have as few as just 1 employee. And the reason to use these different subgroups is to give you a little bit of flexibility in how you structure the hour reductions and how you treat the employees in terms of ramping them back up to full time. So you must treat employees within a subgroup the same, but you can treat employees in different subgroups differently, which does give flexibility. So for instance, employees with a different percent reduction would be in separate subgroups. So if you have employees who are going to be scaled down to a full 40% reduced hours, you could put them in one subgroup. But you've got some folks who you want to just scale down to 10% reduction, then those would be in a different subgroup. And that gives you some flexibility to treat your employees differently in terms of the reduced hours. Like I said, it also gives you some flexibility in terms of bringing folks back on at full time. So one subgroup could remain at a 40% reduction, and the other subgroup could come back on to full time, and everything would still be running smoothly if you break these into subgroups. Finally, I've had several clients use different subgroups just for administrative ease. We've got several hospital clients, for example, who have multiple departments, and they found it easier to break their program up into subgroups by department. That way their department manager can kind of run their subgroup and run those weekly forms, and they found it just a little bit easier for them on the administrative paperwork side of things, and that's absolutely fine as well. So there are several different ways you can use these subgroups, but the key is that it gives you flexibility in how you treat employees within the plan. And now I'll just go over some common questions that we've gotten since we've been helping people with these over the last couple of months. And we've learned these from DWS as we've gone, wanted to share some of the information we've received. So the first question is, can I use the program if I received a PPP loan? The answer is yes. We've had some clients who've implemented the shared work program while they were receiving PPP funds. You have to do this a little bit creatively because you do have to meet your requirement of paying 75% payroll with your funds. But we've had people that have been able to start the program and do reductions of 10 or 20%, and that's been helpful for them. I think at this point, as Mike said, we are kind of coming off of the PPP proceeds, and people are now really seeing a lot of benefit in shifting into the shared work program after the PPP loan. And the good news is, for most folks who've received a PPP loan, they have kept their folks on at full hours or reduced hours, so they would still qualify for the shared work program. So this is a good alternative for them to think about once they're coming off the PPP. Second question is, my employees are higher earning, will they still be able to receive unemployment benefits on the shared work program? As Mike said, the answer is yes. The beauty of this program is that it is allowing employees who would typically be disqualified from receiving unemployment benefits in a partial unemployment setting to receive some amount of unemployment benefits plus that $600 weekly benefit until the end of July. So, many of our clients who have utilized the program, excuse me, have have had higher earning employees, and this has given them some flexibility to reduce their hours and provide them unemployment benefits to make them whole, where in a regular traditional unemployment setting, those people would have zeroed out their unemployment benefits and not been able to receive anything. So I think this is particularly helpful for those employees. Third, does the shared work program apply to exempt employees? Traditionally, this program was designed for hourly 40-hour-a-week workers, but DWS has been great about working with employers and getting creative to make this program work, particularly during this pandemic, to fit as many people as it can. So you can use the program for exempt employees, and what you do is you basically just tailor it off of a 40-hour work week. And so you would reduce hours accordingly and reduce pay in a corresponding way. So you can use the program for exempt salaried employees. One word of caution there is if you do reduce hours and pay for exempt people, you may run the risk of reducing their pay so much that they would be non-exempt. And in that case, you would just want to be careful that you're following all of the laws in terms of, paying overtime and record keeping and that kind of thing under the Fair Labor Standards Act. For the most part, I think that's an academic point, because if you're reducing hours, you're probably not running into overtime, but it is something to consider there. The next question is, can I apply for the shared work program if I've already reduced hours or pay? Yes, you can, and many people have done this. You just can't use the shared work program if you've already furloughed or laid people off. Can I apply for the shared work program now but not implement it till later? The answer to this is yes, and that has worked out well for some clients. If you know that you don't need to do it until July, you can go ahead and submit it and get everything in place, and then start it in July. Or even I've got a client who knows that they'll be pretty busy this summer because they're more of a seasonal type employer, but come fall things will slow down, and so they're going to get their application together and submit it for a September start date, and that's fine as well. The next question, I think on the next set of slides there, if you can change over, Tabitha, is what if I choose to lay off employees after I create a shared work program? So the shared work program is really designed to prevent furloughs and layoffs. So if you do this, then you would be ineligible for the shared work program for 4 months. So in this case, it would be better to see if you can creatively, do some reduced hours or increase everybody up to the 40% range if you need to, as opposed to doing layoffs. Next question, are reimbursing employers eligible to participate? And we've gotten this question a lot for nonprofit employers who typically reimburse DWS on the back end as opposed to paying into the system as they go. They want to know how this will affect them. And there really was some uncertainty around this question even after the CARES Act came out. The CARES Act just said that DOL should provide some flexibility to state workforce services to reimbursing employers to help them out. And so we didn't really know what that meant. Within the last month or so, DOL has come out with some official guidance that said reimbursing employers will get help from the federal government in the form of basically paying in 50%. So in the shared work context, if a nonprofit reimbursing employer has employees participating in a shared work program, as opposed to having to pay full freight for the employees at the end of the program, they would only have to pay 50%, which is a pretty good deal. We've also heard from DWS that these employers their payments will be delayed somewhat, so they won't have to pay until next year to give folks a little flexibility. So I think that's provided some sense of relief to nonprofit employers, and I've had several clients who are nonprofits who have now taken advantage of this program once they kind of had some more certainty around what their expectations would be around them on that. The next question is, my employees are working remotely. Can I use an electronic signature for the weekly certification forms? I've just gotten the answer to this in the last couple of days, and I think it's great news. The answer is yes, DWS will accept an e-signature for these weekly certification forms. And I think what they realized is that they were getting, pictures from iPhones of signatures, and things were hard to read and hard to manage. And we worked with DWS to say, if we could have electronic signatures work for this, you could probably get a more streamlined, easy to read set of forms. And so they said, as long as the employee and the employer will stand by that signature, they will accept e-signatures, which is providing additional flexibility for employers who have, employees who are working remotely right now. The next question is, how does paid time off factor in? And this is kind of an interesting one. It kind of works in tandem, I think, with the next one, which has to do with how does sick leave work into the system. So DWS treats paid time off, whether that's paid holiday, PTO, anything like that, as hours worked, because basically that would be wages that the employer is paying you as opposed to DWS is paying you. So part of these weekly certification forms is to let DWS know how many hours were worked or paid by your employer. And basically, if you're working a 40-hour work week, a 40-hour reduction in that equals 24 hours. So you can't go below that. So in terms of how many hours you've worked, and same with the 10%. So you have to stay within that 10 to 40%. And so on the forms, you just have to certify hours worked, including any, paid time off. And so that will, on weeks like, for instance, Memorial Day this last week, that did affect some people. And so that's just one other consideration as you implement your program. This last question is, what if an employee on a shared work program contracts COVID-19? This is unfortunately, I think, a reality that we're going to have to deal with more and more with people coming back to work. And I've had a couple of clients actually already having to deal with this on a shared work program. And, if an employee contracts COVID-19, they will be, I guess, depending on the employer, either entitled to some paid sick leave under the Families First Act, or if they work for a larger employer, then they would be entitled to unemployment for the time that they were off. And so DWS is working with those employers on the shared work program to provide some flexibility. So if, for instance, you're getting full 2 weeks paid sick leave under Families First, they're not going to disqualify this employee from the program as long as you let them know what's going on. And similarly, if they work for a larger employer and they aren't entitled to paid leave, then DWS has said that they can move them on to full unemployment for those 2 weeks without disqualifying them from the shared work program, and then just ship them back once the employee is well and is back at work. And so I think the big takeaway from all of this is that DWS really sees the benefit of this for the employer and the employee, and they have been doing an amazing job to be flexible and creative to make this work for folks, and helping as many people get these benefits as they can. And so I really applaud their effort on this. I know they're working overtime, and I think that has really made the program work well for many of our clients.
Great, thanks, Katie. And so one reminder to everybody, stay tuned, because things are changing every day. Congress is busy at work trying to change everything up again. And as Katie and I have been telling people for 66 days or whatever it's been since the CARES Act was passed, we're all just flying by the seat of our pants because we're having to learn every day. And as Katie said, some of those questions she learned the answers to just in the last couple of days have been things that have come up throughout this process. So one of the questions I got in chat was, for a lot of folks who tried to react quickly when everything happened and laid people off, how does that affect their ability to apply for a shared work program? And the reality is that if you apply for a shared work program and don't include the people who were laid off, then all of the people who weren't subject to layoff are perfectly eligible to participate in that program. As a matter of fact, if you're gonna have 40 people in the shared work program, you can put in 4 people who were laid off, because you're just subject to a 10% limit on your affected group. Any other questions from folks? All right. I don't see any more questions. We sure appreciate y'all being with us this morning. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.